Good morning. Thank you for joining us today on the March 20th SBCAG Board's meeting. For the record, my name is Randy Rouse. I'm the chair of the current SBCAG Board. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Director Lee? Here. Director Capps? Here. Director Hartman? Director Nelson?
Here.
Director Lavanino?
Here.
Director Mosby?
Here.
Director Brown?
Here.
Director Julian?
Here.
Director Silva?
Here.
Director Patino?
Here.
Director Parodi?
Here.
Director Clark?
Here.
And Chair Rouse.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, then, very good. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? And begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, very good. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment or public comments that have been provided?
Chair Rouse, we did not receive any speaker slips, and there are no raised hands on Zoom.
All right, very good. And we'll go ahead with the consent calendar. Are there any items that any director would like to pull for a comment or a question? Anything in Santa Maria?
Nothing here.
All right, very good. And is there any public comment on any of the items on consent, Madam Clerk?
No public comments were received on the consent calendar.
Okay, with that, we'll entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
Motion to approve.
Moved by Silva, second by Brown. All right, very good. May we have the vote, please? Roll call vote.
Director Lee?
Aye.
Director Capps? Aye. Director Nelson?
He stepped away.
And he's back, yeah.
A agenda.
Yep. Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Director Lavanino?
Aye.
Director Mosby?
Aye.
Director Brown?
Aye.
Director Julian?
Aye.
Director Silva?
Aye.
Director Patino?
Aye.
Director Parodi?
Aye.
Director Clark?
Aye.
And Chair Rouse.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. That takes care of the consent calendar. And then, Madam Clerk, would you please read 5A into the record?
Discussion item 5A, Measure A Strategic Plan Update, Impact of State Policies on Delivery of Remaining Measure A Regional Projects. 1, receive update on development of 2025 Measure A Strategic Plan. 2, receive presentation on impact of state policies on delivery of remaining Measure A regional projects. And 3, provide feedback to SBCAG staff.
Very good. Mr. Koschek, long time no see.
Yes, good to see you again. Good morning, Chair, Director, Sarkis Kacek, Programming Director at SBCAG. I'm also joined today by Brianna Medvecki with Caltrans District 5. She's online by Zoom. And we're also joined by Brett Fulgoni, the Public Works Director for City of Santa Maria. He's in the Santa Maria location. So we have a team today to help present on the Measure A Strategic Plan. Next slide, please. So this is a presentation that was presented to the Technical Transportation Advisory Committee and the North County and South Coast Sub-Regional Committees last week. So the information today, I'm not going to go as in-depth as last week, but if there are any questions, please let us know. So today we're looking for feedback from the full board on the Measure A Strategic Plan. What we've done so far is conduct an analysis of how state policies are impacting remaining Measure A regional projects or named projects, and then we'll be coming back to your board with additional check-ins on the strategic plan. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the strategic plan, as Executive Director Kern has mentioned before, we treat the strategic plan as our regional transportation plan for Measure A. So what we do is we use the strategic plan to guide the prioritization and delivery of projects in Measure A for the regional projects. What we do is we look at the scope, cost, schedule, and available funding every 5 years to let your board and let the public know on how we're able to deliver on the Measure A strategic plan. We're also looking at any issues or risks related to delivery of the Measure A program. And so that's one thing that we're looking at today is how state policies are impacting our ability to deliver on the strategic plan. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is, we've been working on this strategic plan for about a year now. We had a couple of milestones that we achieved last year with the strategic plan. First was renaming the Goleta Overpass project to Project Connect, and that project is under construction. We're also looking at the risk of the state policies, which I'll go over in a second. And then coming to your board, the next couple months will be a really significant discussion that will be looking at how do we use regional funding for projects after Santa Barbara 101 is completed. There are 3 funding programs which we'll cover at the end of the presentation as sort of like the preview. But overall, we have about $10 million in funding that comes from the state and federal government to our county to use for projects in our region. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick check-in on where we are. As I mentioned, we did the investment plan amendment last year. We've been busy working on Senate Bill 1 Cycle 4 applications with Caltrans and the City of Santa Barbara. So those got submitted in December. And then since then, we've been working with Caltrans and City of Santa Maria on the impact of the state policies. And as I mentioned, we'll come back on the discussion on regional funding. We're also going to talk about cost savings. There are cost savings in North County from previously delivered projects that could be utilized for remaining projects. And then our goal is to come to your board with the draft strategic plan in November for approval in December. Now, if there's still some things that we feel like, we need to talk about them again, we do have the ability to do an amendment to the investment plan or to the strategic plan. So when we adopt it in December, if we feel like we need to come back in spring of next year, we have that option as well. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. So just quickly, as you're all aware, the Measure A investment plan was developed in 2007 and approved in 2008 by voters. We've had many different administrations at the federal and state level. And so what we do as staff is make sure that we're working with our local partners, but also working with the board and stakeholders to ensure that our projects not only remain eligible, but also competitive funding, as we do need outside funding for delivery of these projects. Next slide, please. So as I shared at the sub-regional meetings, we look at Measure A over the 30 years as sort of like 3 phases. We had the early delivery with North County projects. We're in the Santa Barbara 101 delivery phase, and then we have remaining projects in North County that we're going to deliver. We have some of the accomplishments in the North County up on the screen. One significant action that impacted Measure A was the state passing Senate Bill 1 and creating competitive programs for that outside funding. So that's something that we've been tapping into with Caltrans and been successful. Caltrans has also experienced an infusion of funding in the State Highway Operation Protection Program, and that's also been helpful for us because 2 projects in the regional program have been added and are fully funded by Caltrans. And then the other note is that Measure A revenues continue to increase. Since 2008, it's been a considerable increase from $35 million to $55 million. We're monitoring now with any changes in the economy, but right now Measure A is hanging tight at about $55 million, and then we expect it to increase in a couple years again. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, with Senate Bill 1 funding, we have received 2 awards for Santa Barbara 101, which have been critical with our delivery. We've reached a lot of milestones, including opening 7.5 miles of HOV lanes on the South Coast, so that's good news, and we have a couple more phases under construction. We do have one more application that we're waiting for from the California Transportation Commission. We find out about that award in June. And then here we are today is looking at the remaining North County projects. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, Measure A passed in 2007 under Governor Schwarzenegger. We've had Governor Jerry Brown. We now have Governor Gavin Newsom. Governor Newsom signed executive orders back in 2019 to look at how transportation projects are implemented and selected for funding. And so we're under that focus with the executive orders. And so what we're doing is looking at how we fit within that framework. Luckily for us, a lot of our projects do meet state goals related to congestion relief and safety. And so it's been a good thing for us that we're still within that eligibility and competitiveness. But the state does want to look at how people travel in California, and so reducing vehicle miles traveled, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, so we're mindful of that. And then the state is using the framework of the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, which I'll cover in a second, to look at which projects that they want to submit for either federal competitive funding or for Senate Bill 1 funding. Next slide, please. So we're impacted because the remaining projects are on the state highway system. We have the Santa Maria interchanges, and then we have the 246 passing lanes phase 2. These projects are still going through, have not started environmental, and so we're within that paradigm of the executive orders by the governor. So what we've been doing is working with the city of Santa Maria and Caltrans to provide the information on the analysis required, which I'll go over in a second. But a lot of information is required. We already went through it, fortunately, with the Santa Barbara 101 project, and that project was able to get through the process and get the recommendation from Caltrans for submittal to the Commission for Senate Bill 1. So this is nothing new for us. We're actually the guinea pig in Caltrans District 5 for doing this early initial analysis, but we're finding it really helpful to see where we are and then how we can provide additional information to Caltrans. Next slide, please. So the first state policy, which I mentioned, was Senate Bill 743. This is looking at how projects are evaluated for impacts. And so before it was level of service or how traffic was flowing. Now it's vehicle miles traveled or how far does somebody have to travel to get from point A to point B. So this is a big impact, not just for us, but as well as local partners. Just real quickly, we continue to advocate that some of these policies impact rural areas differently than the urban areas. And so we actually shared that yesterday, which Director Kern will mention in a second. But that is resonating at the state level because we do have projects that are lifeline projects. If there's a fire or something like that, a lot of these facilities are only way in and out. And so the state is definitely hearing that and looking at ways to evaluate projects. Next slide, please. And then this is something that Brianna will go into more, but the executive orders on climate were related to the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure. So this is the guiding document for the state on how projects are impacting communities. And then there's a sub-product called the Caltrans System Investment Strategy where the actual scoring is happening, and Brianna will go over that. Next slide, please. So in your staff report, you'll see a table that lists the remaining projects. One thing I wanted to note, while Santa Barbara 101 has the environmental document completed, is going through design, and is receiving funding based on the different phases that we have, we still do have that final phase for E-North and Santa Barbara, and the Cabrillo, and other projects. We submitted applications. We're going to know on June 6th on the outcome of that award, and then the commission will approve it in late June. One thing that we wanted to note here is that we submitted applications in December of 2024. This was before that we knew about the tariff policy by President Trump. So what we're doing is working with the project team to see how the cost proposals will be coming in. So we just wanted to share that with the board that we're going to have a better idea in later this year of if there are any impacts of tariffs on the project costs. but the award that happens in June was based on what we submitted back in December. So this is a competitive process. We can't go back to the commission and say, well, because of tariffs, costs changed, so we'll keep you updated as we go along on the project. The remaining projects are listed. 246 Alamo Potato Bridge in Solvang, as I mentioned, is fully funded by Caltrans. Highway 166 in Guadalupe is also fully funded with Measure A and SHOP funding. And then 246 Robinson Bridge in Lompoc, same, also fully funded with SHOP and Measure A. Next slide, please. So in the spirit of March Madness, we're at the final four. So these are the final four projects that we have. We have the 3 Santa Maria interchanges, and then we have 246 passing lanes phase 2. And so this is what we've been working on with Caltrans and Santa Maria on the project information. These projects do not have the environmental documents yet, so they're still in the early phases. But we're working with the city to get these projects ready for funding. And then, as I mentioned, these projects will require outside funding. We think maybe one of them may not. That could be the Highway 101 Beta-Ravia Road interchange. And so we think that project cost could be funded with Measure A, Santa Maria funding, and then regional funding that we have. So that'll be part of the discussion starting next month. Next slide, please. So the Beta-Ravia Road interchange, we think this project at this time will cost $10 to $20 million. We're obviously still working with the city of Santa Maria on determining the final costs. So that's where Beta-Ravia is. 101, 135. This is an existing interchange, so we're looking at improvements to improve flow of vehicles, as well as any electric vehicle charging or bicycle pedestrian improvements or transit improvements. And so the city of Santa Maria actually has a pretty good idea of what the project looks like, and so we'll have more information on that. But this project, we're estimating at this time to be $40 to $70 million. So we don't have enough Measure A funding, and it'll be considerable regional funding. So this is a project where we feel like we can apply for state or federal funding to get it fully funded. US 101 McCoy Lane interchange. This is not an existing interchange. This would be a brand new one. The city of Santa Maria is currently going through a general plan update, and so at this time, no movement is happening on McCoy, but as soon as the city is done with the general plan update, we can come back to your board with an update as well. And then the final project is 246 passing lanes. Phase 1 was completed a few years ago. Phase 2 is in need of funding. It's actually the final project prioritized in Measure A. We have met with the cities of Buellton and Lompoc and the county of Santa Barbara to discuss the project and what the phase 2 would look like. So far, the early indication is that the phase 1 did provide a lot of benefits, and so we're working with the local partners to see what phase 2 would look like, and then we'll come back to the board with more information as well. Next slide, please. So this is an important slide. This slide is showcasing what we're going to be talking with your board about starting next month. So as I mentioned at the sub-regional meetings, we have 3 fund sources that come from the federal and state government to our county. Your board, working with TTAC and with your board approval, we then select the projects for that funding. The funding has been in a reserve for Highway 101 and has been used for project delivery as well as matching funds, so that's been a couple benefits there. But the first program is the Regional Surface Transportation Program. This is federal funding that comes in. We receive about $7 million per year, and then we distribute $1.8 million off the top to local partners based on population for local road improvements. And then the balance is used on 101 currently. The second program is the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or what we call RTIP. This is our share of state gas tax funding that comes in. So this is a formula funding that we receive and then has been used on 101. And then the final program is the local partnership program. This is from the state. This is collected from a fee and the state gas tax. And so it's a reward for counties that have voter-approved transportation measures like Santa Barbara County. So this is funding that we receive each year at about $1.3 million. It'll keep coming to us through 2040, and then as the board considers a renewal of Measure A, this is a great program because it also gives us the flex. It's a very flexible program with the commission, and so we've been able to use it as well in the corridor. And so once Santa Barbara 101 is completed, we will have about $10 million available each year. And so we're going to present as background on the information on the programs next month, and then we'll come back with some draft scenarios for using the funding. So this is my last slide. Here's the feedback that we received from your committees last week at the North County and South Coast Regionals. So we're mindful of what's happening at the federal level and monitoring that. We're also mindful of advocating to the state of what the urban and rural needs are, especially how they impact Santa Barbara County. And that was also something shared at the South Coast Subregional. Next slide, please. So next steps, we have the initial analysis that Brianna will share, and then we're going to come back to your board with the regional funding discussion starting next month. So any feedback today would be great. We do have Caltrans who's ready to share their presentation, but I can be happy to stop here and entertain any questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from board members of staff? Any in Santa Maria? Oh, I'm sorry, Director Mosby has a question.
So Lompoc with the base there, it's a little bit more unique, and there is, in the past, special federal funding for the base to help with highways and stuff. And maybe there's, items that it doesn't look like you've researched it. I'm sure you guys are always looking, but especially with as many launches going on and as important the corridor is to transport their propellants and such into the town, as well as the people into town. So is there some other funding?
Yes, well, so we've done the early research on federal funding, and so and I think you're specifically asking about Robinson Bridge, or is it just other projects as well?
At one time, they were very creative when the MX missile project was coming. They were going to put the Central Avenue extension was going to be majority funded. So I'm just, and, it's a moving target too, as well as things come and go and projects come and go at the base out there. So I'm just wondering if there's something else out there.
Yeah, there are definitely federal options that we will look at, and then we're working with the city of Lompoc and the county as well. So we're not resting on our laurels at all, but we can probably provide an update on those opportunities next month as well.
Yeah. I also worked by a base in Merced County as well. And these funding sources don't come to a regional board such as yourselves. They are done in the military, and those decisions are made in that realm. So yes, they may be available, but it's not a decision of this board to, pursue and or program to those funds. They just kind of come to you. So it's your relationships with the base that makes those things happen. So I think that's something we can pursue in building those relationships to see if there's funding opportunities there. But from my perspective, that funding doesn't come through any federal or state process that we normally do here. So it just gets done somehow.
All right, further questions from here or any in Santa Maria?
Yes, Chair Rouse, I have a question.
Director Nelson.
Yes, thank you. Sarkis, thank you for the presentation. On slide 19, there's the $10.5 million from the different non-Measure A funding programs that we're looking at having more discretion on in the future. What about just, do we have a good handle on what the excess Measure A funding will look like? Because, I know that we've added some inflationary numbers on some of these projects, but, it is a pretty big delta between what we thought we were going to be getting and what we're actually getting in Measure A funding. How are those dollars pulling together to create surpluses in forward years?
Yes, thank you, Director Nelson, for the question through the chair. So we just quickly, we have North County cost savings that I mentioned previously. So that's at about $17 million. And so that was from some of those early projects that got delivered under cost. And then those revenues have continued to increase. So what happens in Measure A is that in the investment plan, we had identified numbers, and then we took those numbers off the total and then created percentages. So each project continues to receive a percentage of Measure A revenues. So the revenues continue to collect, and we do have an idea, at least on the cost saving side, and then we'll come back to your board with a more detailed information on where we're at with each project as an aggregate.
Yeah, I think I don't quite understand that completely, so I think I might need a little bit extra time on it. So give me an example like on the 101 widening, so that there was 140 million. Once that's done, will that project continue to accumulate cost savings or increases in sales tax beyond what we had projected?
Yes. So we projected 140 million for Measure A in the investment plan. With the increase in revenues, we project through 2040 that the amount is about $170 million. But what we're doing with 101 is that we're taking the 170 and using that for leveraging and matching funds. So the state, we have the 170 available for 101 as an example. The other projects, what we're doing is we're leveraging the 170 to answer your question. The other projects that have been completed previously still are collecting their revenues based on how much money actually comes in every month from Measure A. So I hope that clarifies a little bit.
That helps a little bit. So the 170 is frozen in like 2025 numbers. So, but Measure A's got another 15 years.
Yes.
Right, and as those revenues come in higher,
so the
that
revenues
170 number is going to get higher.
The revenues for 101 continue to stay with 101 because of the split that we have in Measure A. And what we're going to continue to use the 170 to help pay for the project. Even though we're in 2025, our revenue consultant says that by the time of Measure A ends, it's going to be 170.
Okay, so that's the 30 million is through the entire life of the measure,
Yes.
not just from that point till today.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Very good. Any further questions in North County? Anyone from here? Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any public comment?
Chair Rouse, we did not receive any public comments on this item.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair. Oh, we also have the Caltrans presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sorry. So that won't, again, since you heard it last week, we're going to streamline that presentation as well. So Brianna, I think you're on.
We cannot hear you, so you'll have to figure out some.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Is everyone able to see the presentation?
No, so our IT needs to share the screen from the Zoom. Is that possible? There we go. Okay, now we can see the screen. So thank you. Continue on.
Okay. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Alrighty, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Brianna Vidvecki. I'm the District 5 Non-Shot PID Coordinator. Today, I'll be presenting on the Caltrans preliminary self-evaluation process for locally sponsored projects under CAPDI and CSIS alignment. The presentation today will begin with a background into CAPDI and CSIS, as well as how these documents have influenced each other into producing the new Caltrans standard for non-shot project prioritization and funding allocation strategies. In case this is the first time you're hearing the terms CAPDI and CSIS, I'll be starting from the beginning and giving a brief overview into these two important documents that are currently shaping transportation investments throughout California. The Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, also known as CAPDI, builds upon executive orders signed in 2019 and 2020 by Governor Gavin Newsom, reinforcing California's commitment to working towards a sustainable, equitable, and climate-conscious transportation system. This plan, formally adopted by the California State Transportation Agency, serves as a strategic roadmap detailing how the state should invest billions of discretionary transportation dollars. At the core of CAPDI are the 10 guiding principles, which emphasize climate resilience, equity, safety, and sustainability in our transportation investments. These principles ensure that the state prioritizes projects that not only improve mobility, but also align with California's environmental and social goals. As a response to the adoption of CAPDI, Caltrans has committed to prioritize the allocation of discretionary funds to projects that align with the CAPDI guiding principles. To support this effort, Caltrans developed the Caltrans System Investment Strategy, also known as CSIS. This is a scoring system designed to measure project alignment with CAPDI's objectives and guide funding decisions accordingly. This approach allows Caltrans to identify and fund transportation projects that actively contribute to California's climate and equity goals. As mentioned previously, CSIS is the Caltrans System Investment Strategy. This document identifies a structured, data-driven approach to project prioritization that ensures transportation investments align with CAPDI's principles. The CSIS investment framework provides methodology and process for allocating billions of dollars in highly competitive discretionary funds. Rather than making investment decisions based on traditional factors alone, CSIS incorporates performance metrics and data-driven analysis to ensure that projects directly support the 10 CAPDI guiding principles. At its core, the CSIS scoring system serves as the primary tool for evaluating and prioritizing projects seeking discretionary funds. This system helps identify which projects will provide the most significant benefits to California's transportation network while also advancing climate and equity goals. Projects that score well during the CSIS scoring process have an increased opportunity for project nomination and being awarded discretionary funds. The CSIS investment framework is an umbrella term describing the process of obtaining the CSIS evaluation. The CSIS evaluation will comprise of the program fit and CAPDI alignment metric score. The program fit assessment mirrors the program guidelines by ensuring the projects meet program objectives, eligibility, requirements, and are competitive under the key program criteria. The program fit evaluation is scored by conducting a low, medium, or high program fit. The CAPDI alignment metrics is a data and performance-based consolidation of CAPDI's guiding principles under CSIS investment framework. The 11 metrics shown on the right are each evaluated on an individual 10-point scale. The CSIS document and CSIS investment framework were provided by the Caltrans Sacramento office and distributed to all districts for transparency into project prioritization. Caltrans District 5 has created a tool to help our partners with a preliminary scoring process of locally sponsored non-shop projects to ensure the projects are working toward CAPDI alignment from the beginning of the project development stage. District 5 has created a preliminary self-evaluation tool to help with the initial CAPDI alignment assessment of non-shop projects. This tool will help conduct high-level preliminary overviews to aid in our partners identifying areas of low, medium, or high CAPDI alignment. We have been working with SBCAG to do the preliminary self-evaluation for the State Route 246 Passing Lanes Project, the Betteravia Interchange Improvement Project, and the State Route 135 Interchange projects. This tool will help assess projects based on metrics that mirror the CAPDI alignment metrics from the CSIS investment framework presented previously. Each of the 9 metrics displayed on the screen will be scored from a 0 to 10. The total score will be out of 90. Project scoring in the 0 to 30 range will be considered low opportunity projects. Projects in the 31 to 60 range will be considered medium opportunity projects, and projects in the 61 to 90 range will be considered high opportunity projects. The goal for this tool is to help our local partners become more competitive for discretionary funding and ultimately increase the opportunity of receiving future Caltrans support. A key point to remember is this preliminary scoring system we have created at District 5 is not the official CSIS evaluation, which was shown in the previous slide. Whereas the CSIS evaluation is conducted after the project initiation development phase has been completed, and those scores directly impact the funding allocation. The sole purpose for this tool is to help us as a district identify areas of poor metric alignment from the beginning stages of project development. Over the last few months, we have been using this tool with the SBCAG staff to communicate areas where projects can improve with the intention of curating the project to become as competitive as possible for the future discretionary funding. The preliminary self-evaluation scores are intended to help our partners have the best opportunity of receiving funding for discretionary programs. District 5 will help our partners fine-tune projects from the beginning, so when they go through the official CSIS evaluation, the project can be in the best possible position to be CAPDI aligned and be as competitive as possible for future funding opportunities. Now we'll go through a quick overview of each of the projects that we have done the scoring system with, aka use the our new tool that we're working with SBCAG to do an initial evaluation of their projects. So here's the preliminary evaluation of the State Route 246 Passing Lanes project. This project is currently in the low opportunity ranking. This passing lanes project is beneficial to the safety and freight sustainability and efficiency metrics. However, improvements do need to be made for an overall better CAPDI alignment. We are working on producing improvement suggestions to increase the project's overall score. The Betteravia Road Interchange project is in a similar boat as the State Route 246 project. This interchange project is beneficial to safety and accessibility. However, all other metrics are also in low alignment. The overall project is in the low opportunity ranking. Again, we want to remind everyone this does not prevent the project from moving forward. However, it would likely not compete well with its current scope. A low alignment score may result in Caltrans' inability to support the project in future discretionary funding cycles. During the preliminary scoring process, the US 101 State Route 135 Interchange project is showing as a medium opportunity project. We see strong alignment in the safety, accessibility, ZEV infrastructure, and equity and public engagement metrics. With the anticipated future collaboration alongside SBCAG, this project could be a good prospect for Caltrans support. We look forward to working with SBCAG to further align and improve the project scores that have been presented today to have them be viable for discretionary funding. Thank you guys so much for listening to our presentation. As mentioned before, my name is Brianna Medvecki. I'm the District 5 Non-Shop PID Coordinator, and my senior is Jimmy Ochoa. If you guys have any questions about the presentation today, please feel free to reach out to either of us.
All right, very good. Are there any questions of staff on this item? Okay, Director Brown?
Brianna, thank you. My question is on vehicle miles traveled. How do they calculate that for this purpose? Because I know we have intersections that have very low vehicle miles traveled, but there's a backup because it's a local. People aren't traveling long distances, but the short distances and the intersections are becoming impacted with long wait times. Do you not include traffic count with vehicle miles traveled, or explain that matrix more to me if you would?
Of course, and as Sarkis did mention, this was kind of a more or less a guinea pig run with these first 3 projects that we're using the tool with, and so we are still modifying and adjusting how we are doing the evaluations. But based on this first round, we've been going off of anticipated impact, and the information we've received from each of the projects was fairly minimal. And so we have also communicated with SBCAG and people involved in the project that as more information, more project information and details come in, the scores are very much modifiable, or can be modified. So right now we're just going based on anticipated impact. And we did receive minimal information on the project. So we will be continue to work with SBCAG to further make sure that the metrics are in a realistic range of where they were placed.
Mr. Chairperson, can I give a try on so when they look at vehicle miles traveled, they're looking at a reduction of vehicle miles traveled. So they'll look at the project with and without the project, or look at the corridor with and without the project. And if there's not a reduction in vehicle miles traveled because of the project, it's going to score low. So if you're changing vehicle miles traveled, say you have a bike path that you're anticipating more people biking, or you have a transit stop where more people are going to ride transit, those are the things that will reduce your VMT compared to the no-build alternative. So when a passing lane, you're probably not going to change the VMT because people are going to be on the road with or without the passing lane. So there's not a change in that VMT, so that's why you score low. So does that help? Okay.
Further questions here? Questions in Santa Maria?
Yes, Chair Rouse, thank you. Supervisor or Director Nelson up here, thank you. Great presentation, Brianna, just like you provided to us at the North County Subregional. And so I just have a few comments, just since this is the recorded and public meeting for this. But and I don't want you to think I'm shooting the messenger. But some of the stuff definitely is troubling when we look at it, where something like safety and public engagement are weighted equally. I mean, that's just I think really hard for the public to absorb that when we start to look at these things. I would think that safety would be paramount when we're making these type of evaluations. I also am concerned that this is really an urban metric, and we are a rural and suburban area, and I think we're at a disadvantage because of that. And I think that that's really also troubling that we would be building this to, this is how we get the roads to nowhere type of thing, and our bike paths to nowhere is because we prioritize these things and we spend millions of dollars on things just to fit a scoring sheet. Like we're teaching to the test, instead of teaching to the actual knowledge part, which is actually getting something done in an effective and efficient way. So I just want to throw those out there as concerns and warnings. Also, I am somewhat troubled that most of this is based on a foundation of executive orders, and I think that's been a topic that we've all been hearing about lately on executive orders. And so I guess, is there any legislation that actually authorizes this as well? How does that all fit? If it's all based on executive orders, we should be seeing a new governor in a year or two. Could this all change based on that? And how much should we be building our future strategic planning based on the prioritizations of the current executive?
That is a really good question. I would like to get back to you on that after this meeting, if that's possible.
Brianna,
But I would.
Brianna? I'll take a crack at it. Director Nelson, so the three policies that I mentioned, Senate Bill 743, the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, and the Caltrans System Investment Strategy. The first one, Senate Bill 743, is legislation that got signed into law back in 2013 and then got implemented by Caltrans starting in 2017, 2018. And so we continue, at least as SBCAG, to make your point about the impacts of this state policy on rural areas like ours. There's growing momentum at the state level from regions like ours. We're not the only ones just saying, "Oh, this is hurting us." I think, and Director Nelson, you're familiar too with the rural counties as well. There's a lot of momentum to try to inform the state on the impacts of 743 on regions like ours. On the last two, the CAPTI and the CSIS, Caltrans System Investment Strategy, those are based on executive orders by Governor Newsom back in 2019. So first one was legislation, and then the other two were executive orders.
Thank you, Sarkis.
All right, very good.
Director Patino has a question.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dr.
I have
Padilla.
a comment. Oh. Did you call on me or somebody else?
No, Director Patino, please.
Okay. And I don't have to repeat what Director Nelson said. We are, considered urban for criteria on many things, but we are a rural community. And when the state policy changes and when they start changing the rules, when we sat by up here in North County so that we would have the money to do the 101 widening, and we've been very patient and sat by while we needed projects delivered, that doesn't sit well with us. So then we have to adjust to the rules being changed. And that's exactly what they've done to us up here in North County. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments in North County? And anyone here?
Chair Rouse, we do have a comment from Joe Irwin on Zoom.
I'm sorry?
We do have a comment from Joe Irwin on Zoom.
Okay.
He's from Caltrans.
Good morning. Yeah, this is Joe Irwin. I'm the Office Chief of Project Management. I'm here for Scott Eads in his place as the ex officio. To piggyback on what Sarkis had said, we do, from the Caltrans side, we did see that the Rural Counties Task Force has issued a study on induced demand in rural counties. And so we don't have a blind eye to that and what the impacts of the CSIS scores and the CAPTI are on rural communities. So we have seen that induced demand study from the Rural Counties Task Force. So I just wanted to recognize that that we have heard that, and we are seeing that information come through, and then also to come to the defense of Brianna on that one. That it's a combination of state laws and executive orders that is shaping how Caltrans is moving forward in this determination and these and trying to shape projects in the future.
Thank you. Director Capps.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to clarify a little bit on public engagement, because my understanding so far is that, to push back a little bit on my colleague, Supervisor Nelson, public engagement and safety really do go hand in hand. I mean, the way that I learn about unsafe intersections or crosswalks is from the public. And so I can just see that as supporting one another as opposed to somehow being off track. Is that, can you explain what the public engagement score is based on a bit more?
Yes, I can go into that a little bit. So for the public engagement score, this is based on providing a comprehensive public engagement plan. And so with the Better Avia project and the State Route 246 projects, we have not been provided with the plans or the anticipated public engagement that will be conducted for these projects. And so the current score is low, but we have sorry, communicated with Sarkis and the team that once those documents are provided to us, the score can go from low to high fairly quickly just based on the documents provided with the public engagement plan.
If I may, they want to encourage good behavior. So they want you to do that outreach and make sure that whatever project you're proposing is acceptable to the public. And so obviously that's what we do. So we will do those things and make sure that, just like we did with the Santa Lucia Canyon Road project, we're going to ask the public, what's your thoughts on these things and how can we do it better and engage the public in the development of those projects. So again, doing it so early, we're missing those opportunities to get those points because it's too soon to ask that question. And so we will get those points. And so, it may not be a 10, but it may be an 8 or 9, and then it will score better. So yes.
All right.
If I could respond.
Go right ahead.
I want to spar with my director caps here.
There we go. Let's do it.
Let's give something for people to talk about. So I didn't mean to pick on engagement. I was just making the greater point that some of these things should be weighted differently. And, engagement, absolutely. I mean, we should be going for the maximum on all these that are practical, but some things like a rural investment, we may not be looking at infill in a rural area. We may not be looking at ZEV infrastructure in a rural area. And I guess, there might be a capability of that, or even some of the mobility pieces. So that's why I was just making the point that I'm often, and I think most of us are driven by public safety is one of all of our top concerns, especially during election year. And, so I guess my greater point wasn't about engagement or any of these issues to downgrade them, but just to say that I think the weighting of these things is troubling for me, as we kind of look at these things and get back to the public on how we move forward. I think some of them or I think actually all of them are important to look at, and I think we should. And I think that should be where, with the box that we should check is that we looked at it to the maximum capability. But some of these projects, just by the nature of them, will never score high on these things and therefore never be competitive. And that's, to use the technical term, that sucks. So, that was my point.
All right, very good. Well, as a South County representative, I must say that this system, as it is myopic and weighted towards our situation versus North County. So I stand with Directors Nelson and Patino in terms of how they feel about things. As to Director Brown's point about intersections having to switch from LOS to VMT, that doesn't speak to everyone's day-to-day quality of life. And I think that's another thing that really is a myopic way of looking at things from a 30,000-foot level that doesn't meet the boots on the ground level. So once again, not trying to shoot the messenger, but it does have some flaws. Let's see.
Chair Rouse, I think Brianna might still have another comment.
Okay.
Yes, and I just want to reassure everyone that the concerns that were brought up today about the weight of some of the metrics have been expressed by other districts and people going through this eventual CSIS evaluation. And the original CapDiag document, the first document that I presented on today, that was released in July of 2021, and CapDiag 2.0 just came out back in February. And the CSIS investment framework and the Caltrans System Investment Strategy is based on the CapDiag document. And I believe the CSIS is updated every 2-ish years. And so as the Sacramento or the Caltrans office in Sacramento receives feedback, they have been working towards making it an equitable system for all communities. So I do believe that the areas of concern addressed today are being worked towards. Not that it's changed yet, but I do believe it's something that they have in mind. So I just wanted to note that for everyone.
Very good. Thank you for the presentation. This is not an action item. This was for presentation and feedback, so we don't need any motion or action on this. And with that, we can move on and have item 5B, if you would read that into the record, please, Madam Clerk.
Certainly. Discussion item 5B, draft SBCAG fiscal year 2025-26 overall work program and budget. Review and comment on the draft fiscal year 2025-26 SBCAG overall work program and budget, which will be considered for adoption at the April 17th, 2025 board meeting.
Very good. Ms. Kern.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, members of the board. So every year is our overall work program and budget presentation, and I love to do this because it gives me a chance to reflect back on the previous year and present our priorities for the next year. So next slide, just an overview of the presentation today. So we're gonna get into those things a little bit and then get into the numbers. So feel free to interrupt me as we go to answer any questions you may have. So an overview of SBCAG, we are an agency that does many things that cross jurisdictional boundaries, and our job is to get things done. So I'm hoping that you feel that we're the can-do agency and that you're proud to be a part of SBCAG. This slide came out of our retreat that we did a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was evident of how you feel about SBCAG. These are the things that you said what makes SBCAG a success. So I thought I'd share that again, and I'm very proud that I think we're all on the same page of moving the agency forward. So impressive slides in. Okay, I think I messed up. So this was supposed to be the look back of 2025. Okay, the look back of 2024 of what we accomplished. The Goleta train station was one of our milestone events that we had this past year. We also had some ribbon cuttings at the Olive Mill and San Ysidro roundabouts, and if you haven't experienced those roundabouts, oh my gosh, it's so much better. So I encourage you to try them out and check it out, and they look great, and I'm really proud of what was accomplished there. Also this past year, we completed the Black Road intersection project, and we had a celebration of that event. That one took a little longer than we thought. You know, Murphy's Law, it always takes longer than you think, but we were able to accomplish that this year, and it's working very well. We got some feedback from the businesses in the area as well as the traveling public going through that, so it's accomplishing its goal of making 166 safer. And then the 101, we've completed the first 3 segments of the Highway 101 project. It's smooth sailing. I've got some comments back from some commuters that say that it feels like there's a lot less traffic out there. And it's, we know that it's not, that the same amount of people are going by. It's just that you have a lot more room to travel, and it's making their commutes about 20 minutes shorter. So when that full project gets done, we're going to look at some major benefits in that area. And then another major accomplishment this past year is we submitted the grant that you just heard about for the final segment of the 101. And now my new motto is, the 101 is almost done. So once we get that funding, we can put that on bumper stickers or whatever, and we'll move that one forward. So the overall work program is a product that we have to prepare for our federal funding that we get for SBCAG. To do the planning and programming that we are required to do. I find it a very useful document because it connects not only the, I guess go to the next slide, the funding that we get to the work that we want to accomplish over the year, to the staffing and the budget associated with all those work programs. So if you take a look at the overall work program, it's divvied up into work elements, and those are the priorities of the agency, what we're committed to get done over the fiscal year. And it really helps me as a manager of this agency to make sure that we're on target and we're on track, and I have enough staffing and funding to implement those things. So it's a really good management tool, and I take it seriously, and I hope you do too. So moving forward for what we have priorities for the 2025 year, I'm trying to make sure I'm in the right fiscal year, right? 2025-26. We are looking at completing the regional transportation plan. So this is our Bible of how we identify our priorities for the region and what you are directing me to work on and to implement. And everything we do at SBCAG transportation-wise needs to be in the regional transportation plan. So we update this document every 4 years, every 8 years, correct? We also do the RENA process. So this is a non-RENA process update. So the next update of the Regional Transportation Plan will include the Regional Housing Needs Assessment process, which we all know is a very, very big deal for our agencies. So once we adopt this 2025 Regional Transportation Plan, we're going to start on the next one. And because of the RENA, because of the discussions we've had in this past cycle, and seeing if we can do a more comprehensive not only of the allocations of the RENA, but what happens after SBCAG is done and how can we work together in implementing the RENA process in a more cohesive manner. So I'm hoping that it won't be in this overall work program, but it'll be in future ones. Could I ask a question? I think there's a question.
Oh, Director Hartman.
Well, I just wondered if you would comment. We went through the housing process and rezoning without much thought to the traffic impacts.
Yeah.
And as you're talking about integration for the future, is that what you mean?
Well, I was actually thinking of how and where you place that housing and working together with your jurisdictions and that crosses those jurisdictional boundaries and seeing if we can have a more comprehensive, thoughtful process. But yes, the answer to that question is yes, we can bring the traffic and the transportation element in that discussion as well.
If that were possible, I mean, the underlying infrastructure is usually planned first,
Yes.
but we're doing it the reverse and having to reverse engineer, and it makes it very complex.
Yeah. So if we can place that housing where it makes the most sense to complement our transportation infrastructure, that's the ultimate goal of the RENA and the Regional Transportation Plan and the Sustainable Community Strategy that we're required to do by SB 375. So bringing all three of those things together is the goal of the process. So again, I'm just prefacing the next cycle. We're going to get through this cycle, adopted the plan this summer, and then move on. Also this fall, we're going to adopt the Measure A strategic plan that's required every 5 years that you just heard a lot about. And I think, we accomplished our goal in that presentation that you just heard of identifying the change in law and priorities and whatnot and how that's impacting our Measure A regional priorities. And we wanted to make sure that you were aware of that impact because we saw it as well. So how can we still accomplish those regionally significant projects under the new rules that we're dealing with? So again, as your SBCAG staff, we are driven to implement the Measure A priorities and want to make sure that we're doing that on your behalf because that's your priorities that you've identified for us. So again, we're going to keep you apprised along the way of how we intend to do that. And this strategic plan is instrumental in how we move those projects forward under the current situation that we have with those statewide policies. So again, we're all in the same team here. We're trying to get those things done. I'm also hoping, not quite numbers yet, I'm halfway through my list of my priorities for 2025. I'm also hoping that we get a good phone call on June 6th at 4 o'clock. And we have to make plane reservations for Randy Rouse to go to Sacramento to say thank you at the CTC meeting on the 101 project application that we submitted. So again, once we get that, then all, full steam ahead in getting those things done. If we get that funding, then the agreed to price will be finalized in the fall of that year, and hopefully we'll start construction in the beginning of 2026. It's that quick because we have the granite on board with the CMGC general contractor, CMGC, construction management general contractor, and we're ready to go, and that really helps in delivering that project. Can't say enough good things about that. We are still working on broadband. it's not looking good about funding opportunities. We're staying apprised on it. We're looking at the federal opportunities, and they seem to be dwindling, as well as the state. So I will keep you appraised on that. We did apply for a planning grant to update the strategic plan, because we've gotten as far as we can without construction dollars to move that plan forward. So we're looking at updating it to see where we can go with broadband. So stay tuned on that. And then the 166 corridor study should be completed in the next fiscal year as well. So that's between Guadalupe and Santa Maria. And then the last one is we requested funding for the 135 study in the Santa Maria and Orcutt area. So these are things, we're setting the stage for future priorities of this board and giving you the tools and data that you may need to identify those future priorities, maybe for a next measure or what have you, but we're planning ahead for the future. Okay, now we're going to get into some numbers, and again, feel free to interrupt me as we go. Our overall budget is $93 million, 93.5 about there. This is a little less from last year, and this fluctuates based on our project delivery needs of the calendar year, or the fiscal year, excuse me. So last year was 102 million, 102.5 million. So we decreased because we're not anticipating spending as much Measure A dollars, and which went down a little bit. But again, it's not a reflection of the health of the agency, it's just what we anticipate spending our dollars on. And so those Measure A dollars that we discussed earlier, they stay in the pots that they are designated to until we need to spend them. So again, that pot of money and the cash flow of that is what we manage. Moving on, this was a request at a previous ODA budget presentation to identify the discretionary grants that come into our budget. So I like to share this number with you every year. Is this $36 million is what we're by writing grants, by asking for funding. This does not normally come into this region or this agency, but this is my staff advocating on your behalf and getting money into this region to accomplish your goals. The TERSIP was a huge one this past year that we applied as a region to get funding. Senate Bill 125, the zero emission, and and the early regional early action planning. Again, some of this money is passed through, but again, it's SBCAG working together on behalf of the region to garner additional funding that normally would not come to us. Okay. Another question that was brought up by a board member, I think it was Director Perotti last year or 2 years ago, was how much is passed through this agency? That's not necessarily included in our budget. Some of these may be here and there, but the majority of that is not included in the overall budget. But we passed through almost 111 or over $111 million to the jurisdictions. And so my staff manages that, making sure that you are getting those checks and we process those things, but it's not included in the overall general fund budget. Okay, here is the general fund budget. So you see half of our money, it comes from our state and federal resources. This is the planning dollars, the formula dollars that we get from the federal government and the state to do what we do. It basically funds the staff. And we also have local sales tax dollars that we use to help fund the staff. This includes Measure A admin dollars that we take 1% off the top, plus the Transportation Development Act dollars. That's the quarter-cent state sales tax, the unmet needs process and all that fun stuff. We're able to take 3% off the top for planning, and again, that helps pay for our staff. And then the 24% included in this pie chart is from the other funds that I'm going to talk about in a minute, reimbursing the staff time associated with those other activities. So a quarter of our budget comes from the other fund pots. Pots is the right word, or fund? Okay. So our general fund expenses, as you can see, majority of it's salaries and benefits. 4.5 million or so, and then professional services, that's our admin support, our legal support, and any consultant services we have, and then the pass-through of the regional early action plan dollars, the .2 we pass through to the jurisdictions, and then our TDM program as well. So $8 million overall is our general fund to fund what we do, our building, and all the staff associated with that. Included in the salary and benefits, I like to point out that we did include a cost of living approved by the resolution of this board a few years back. It's a 3.4% COLA for staff. This helps me make sure that our salaries remain competitive. So I really strongly believe we should continue having COLAs. We are also in the midst of a salary and classification study, but I did not set aside any dollars to implement that this year because we're a little tight on funding. So we'll present that to you. We'll present options of moving that forward, but I did not set aside any budgets. But the COLA, I feel very strongly that we should include in the budget, and I'm recommending that you do that. And then in addition, there's some merit increases that people who are still eligible, for those who are not topped out, are eligible for merit increases. So I anticipated those. Okay, moving on. This is our org chart. We rearranged a few of the deck chairs, but it's pretty much the same. 21 people. We're a small agency that does big things, and I'm really proud of them. And this is just a little photo collage of our activities throughout the past year and just the fun we have. We just had a really good event in Lompoc. We had a little foot frenzy race running around city of Lompoc, answering clues, and I unfortunately did not win this year, so I'm really sad about that. Okay, moving on to the Service Authority for Freeway Emergencies. This is the dollar we collect per vehicle registered. So this budget only represents what we anticipate spending in the calendar year, but this, again, it's pretty much a wash of what we get in is what we spend. So we're anticipating $784,000 for the SAFE program of revenue, and the next slide shows our expenses. So we still have some call boxes out there that we're paying for, whether or not they're getting used. I haven't done an analysis of that in the last couple of years, but I can ask my staff to do that if you'd like. But it is in those areas where there's no cell phone reception. So it's safety-wise, it's probably prudent to leave those call boxes where they are. But we did remove a majority of them a few years back, and then because they weren't being used and they weren't needed. So we switched allowable expense under the SAFE program is to do rideshare promotion and alternative mode promotion. So we switched most of the funding to our transportation demand management program, which is promoting the van pools and the carpooling and the outreach to employers to get people to not use the freeways and make them safer. Okay, moving on to the Clean Air Express. This chart has changed quite a bit since I started. When we first were presenting this was mostly fare box and Measure A. Those were the two revenue sources paying for the Clean Air Express. And so it was using more Measure A dollars than it was collecting per year in its allocation. So it was getting a percentage allocation like we talked about earlier, but it was exceeding, we were spending more than we were collecting. So we did a short-range transit plan. Included in that is to change that and stop doing that, and to identify other funding sources that could support the Clean Air Express, which we've done. So we are now eligible for Federal Transit Administration dollars that we are collecting. We've been providing the data, so now we can start receiving those funds. So we have to submit all of our ridership data and whatnot to be eligible for them. So we started doing that, and now we're reaping the benefits of that. We are also receiving some Transportation Development Act funds, or local transportation funds, / they're the same thing, from the county. That's the quarter-cent sales tax again. So there's some local transportation funds in there, as well as the Measure A, as well as the fare box. And am I missing? And I think I got it all, right? So again, we diversified the Clean Air Express. It's a much healthier place to be, less vulnerable to, running out of money by the 2030 something we were going to have to make a decision to stop Clean Air Express because we wouldn't have had Measure A. So we've turned that ship around on that, so we should be good moving forward. But we will continue to make Clean Air Express eligible for as many funding sources as we can to continue it on and moving it forward. And we also expand Clean Air Express this past year. We now have a midday route in midday, so we'll give you an update on that shortly because we're just now promoting it. Okay. Here's our expenses. Again, the majority of the expenses are the professional services. This is where, getting those wheels on the road and getting passengers in seats. So, and it also includes our facility that we have, but the majority of the funding is for our contracted operator to operate the buses, provide the drivers, maintain the buses, and make sure the fleet is operating. And so it's a $3.4 million expense, and we are continuing on to provide that service, and we will continue to do so unless told otherwise. The funding distributions for Measure A, I like to make sure that the board is aware that we do have the 3 pots of money that we divvy the Measure A. The first pot is the the 101, Highway 101 HOV project, so that gets 13.4%, and then the remaining dollars, the 43.3%, gets divvied up between north and south, and then under each of those boxes, you can see how the north and south identified their priorities and how different they are between north and south, but that's the way Measure A was designed. So each geographic boundary can decide how they spend those monies, and this is how they decided. But it also includes off the top, we also have our debt service. If you recall, we did a TIFIA loan. This was a federal loan that I may not do again because it was so bureaucratically painful to get through, and we lived and learned. But we may want to think about refinancing that. We've drawn down, I think, all of the money that 50 million of the 70 that were allowed, and so our financial consultants are recommending that we look at refinancing that with the current bond rates, and so we'll bring that back to your board for consideration, but we could save a few $1 million here or there or more if we did that. So since we're not getting the benefit of because the TIFIA allowed us to only draw down what we needed, we didn't have to get the full loan amount and get that big check. I think Goleta just got their big check, and now you're paying interest on that big check. We only drew down what we needed, and we're only paying interest on that money as we drew it down. So it reduced our interest paid. But since we've maxed out, I think what we're going to draw down, refinancing may be a best option moving forward. Okay, and then so what we do with our Measure A dollars, we lump everything together. So you can see that the Measure A part of the revenues is only 27%. That's because we're leveraging almost 49% from other sources. So the fund balance is what's been carried over for those other programs that we anticipate spending. So those things that we've been collecting for the last 15 years, we're going to spend some of those fund balances because those projects are maturing enough to spend those dollars. But overall, we're leveraging 50% of the $81 million from other sources. And that was the whole point of Measure A, is to use our seed money to leverage other sources. So the capital expenditures, again, our staff support is less than 1% of the $81 million. I think, mental math calculator there. But $79 million is going to the programs listed on this slide that we anticipate expenditures over the fiscal year. And that's it. So my summary is we're strong but mighty, or small but mighty agency where we have great staff. I've been hiring just fine, and I want to continue to do that. Our major projects are moving forward. I think last year I said this will be the year of ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings, and I think that came true, so I'm proud about that, and hopefully we'll continue to do so. Our Measure A revenues is stable, and that's a knock on wood thing, but I'm hoping that continues moving forward. And we have a healthy general fund reserve. This board has identified a 3-month reserve, and we have over 6 months in reserve. So we are doing fine as an agency, and I want to continue to do so as your fiscal agent and making sure that things are moving forward in the right direction. I want to tell you they are. So thank you for the time and giving this presentation. I'll take any questions that you may
Any
have.
questions for Director Kern?
It's almost lunch, so. I get it.
Anybody from,
Just a quick, you're recruiting in really great people, you're retaining really great people.
Yes, absolutely. I'm blessed on both sides. So I think the people that we have is helping me recruit great people, the synergy there.
It's like a magnet.
Yes.
and any question, Director Brown.
Will we get a copy of this presentation?
It's included in the,
Can find it.
it should be included on the agenda, so you can download it there, but I can email it to you as well.
Okay. Anything from North County?
Yes, thank you, Chair Rouse.
Nelson.
Quick question for Director Kern. The TIFIA expense that's coming out of that's for 101 widening, so that's coming out of that 170, is that right?
No, it's an overall, it was a loan that we used for the overall Measure A cash flow. So we identified, it also helped the local jurisdictions maintain their revenue that we pass through to them. So it is off the top. It's not just out of the one pot for the 101 project, it's for the entire Measure A program.
Okay, I think at some point it might be nice to draw the percentages differences there. If a majority it was for the 101 widening, I think we should know that. If it's 50-50 on local jurisdictions, it'd be good to see that as well. So just hope that we can get that feedback at some point in the future. And as far as the work plan is concerned, there was a project that was mentioned, I think in the workshops, the West Santa Maria Valley projects there. I don't see that in the work plan yet.
Yeah.
And as well as the Santa Lucia, which has become an emerging issue. Neither one of those are in the work plan. I know that we're not moving forward on those yet, but can we add the initiation of both of those to the work plan?
It's a little different for project delivery. So we are the planning agency and the funding agency, but the planning for those projects are included in the regional transportation plan, which is our implementing document. So once that gets to a stage where it can be initiated as a project, it will be whoever's the lead agency for that project to implement that. So that could be the county or Caltrans, or depending on where the location of the project is. So unless we want to do a corridor study or a little more comprehensive, which we've discussed, we also need additional funding. So we would apply for our next planning cycle in the fall of 2025 for that effort. So I can't include it in the work program until I have funding to implement it.
Okay, because we have some things in here that aren't part of the, we won't be the lead agency on.
Yep.
That are in our, right, so we have.
If we're providing funding for it, yeah.
Okay, so we've already received the funds for the 166 corridor study and the State Route 135?
The 135 is a placeholder, and so we submitted the grant for that, so I need to put it in the overall work program as a placeholder, and if we receive that grant, then all the numbers and the staffing would be added to it.
Cool. Can we go ahead and put placeholders for those other ones? I think those other ones are going to move forward quickly or through this next year. I know that we're working with Caltrans to make sure if they move forward with their safety improvement funding, that corridor study is part of the contingency that we're discussing with them.
Yeah.
So
there wasn't that happened after the grant cycle, so there wasn't a grant submitted for that. So as far as, from my perspective, I don't have any anticipated funding. I would apply for that in the next cycle, which would be September timeframe of 2025, and then I would put it in the 26-27 overall work program as a placeholder until we receive that funding.
Okay, so if Caltrans comes in with the funding outside that funding cycle, right? Because
we can amend.
they may be doing that we can amend this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Are there any public commenters for this item?
We received no public comments for this item.
Okay, very good. Any further board discussion from Ms. Perotti?
I just wanted to thank Ms. Kern and your fabulous team for good work, and thank you for the presentation. And I really enjoyed hearing that there was a healthy reserve. That's always important. So thank you.
All right, very good. Well, this is our first public hearing on the overall work program and budget, and there was just for presentation, and there's no action required on this. So with that, we'll go move on to the next item. Madam Clerk, would you read that into the record, please?
Yes, discussion item 5C, 2025 Transit Needs Assessment. Adopt Resolution 2512 approving the 2025 Transit Needs Assessment, including finding that for fiscal year 2024-25, there are no unmet transit needs which are reasonable to meet.
Very good. Ms. Kulkarni.
Thank you. Good morning, Director and Chair. I'm Maya Kulkarni with SBCAG Programming, and I will be discussing the 2025 Transit Needs Assessment. Next slide, please. So today I am asking you to adopt the resolution to approve the 2025 Transit Needs Assessment, which found that there are no unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet for this fiscal year, or fiscal year 24-25. So essentially, this process requires us to conduct a public process, and then we take those comments and analyze them to see if there are any unmet transit needs. Then we analyze the unmet transit needs to see if there are any that are reasonable to meet, and then we adopt the resolution of the result. And I want to take a step back real quick to give you the bigger picture. So we get state funding through the Transportation Development Act. And under the Transportation Development Act, or TDA, as I'll be referring to, there's two pots of funding. There's state transit assistance and there's local transportation funds. So this process is specifically for the local transportation funds, or the LTF. So TDA law says that if we find that there are no unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet, then we can use the excess the LTF funds for non-transit uses. So that's mainly streets and roads maintenance. So this is the process that we go through to sort of figure out if we have any money that we can use for non-transit uses. And then normally we would come to the board before this process and sort of work back and say, ask you if the board is okay with spending money on non-transit uses. And if you say no, then we do a sort of abbreviated process of this process. But this time, since we are training new staff, which is me, on this process, we decided to go and do the whole thing. Next slide, please. So this is the process that we went through. First, we approved the public participation plan, which we got approved by SBCAG, which is our Transit Advisory Committee. And then we conducted our public process, and we looked at comments to see if there were any unmet needs. And we also got SBCAG concurrence on those unmet needs. And then we analyzed those, and we determined if there were any that were reasonable to meet. We drafted the report, we brought it back to SBCAG for recommendation, and then we come here for board approval for the report and the resolution. And then once we get the resolution approved, we submit that to Caltrans. So this is our public process. We had public hearings at SBCAG as well as in Santa Maria and City of Lompoc. And then we also got comments through our online survey and through email and phone. And we noticed the public comment period via on print and electronic media. Next slide. So we had a total of 83 public comments through all of these means of inputs, which was about in line of what we got last year. Next slide. So we looked at all these public comments and we found 5 unmet transit needs. And that was the later evening service to between Santa Barbara and Lompoc, a bus stop in the southwest quadrant of Isla Vista, the State Street shuttle, which was mentioned in 3 different comments, and then service to Santa Barbara's Botanical Garden, and the last one was service from Isla Vista to La Cumbre Junior High. So we worked with Clean Air Express and MTD to analyze these unmet transit needs against our board-approved reasonable to meet criteria. And we found that there were no unmet transit needs that were reasonable to meet. Next slide, please. And on these next few slides, I want to go over why it's difficult to find unmet transit needs in our county. This map shows it uses demographic and socioeconomic data to show transit demand. The darker polygons show more transit, the darker the polygon, the more transit supportive that population in that area is. Next slide, please. So this is that same map zoomed in for North County, and it also includes the transit routes. So you can see that where the population shows more demand, there are already services in place. And then next slide. And then that's the same thing for South Coast as well. So our regional operators do a good job of meeting the community's transit needs. Next slide. So again, today we're just asking you to approve the 2025 transit needs assessment that shows that there are no unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet. And that is my presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions for Ms. Kulkarni? Director Hartman.
Yeah, could you remind me what the criteria are and maybe take one
Sure,
of those
we actually have a
projects
slide on that.
and take one of the projects and walk us through the analysis?
Yes. Oh, actually, let me do, what's a good project
I have one.
to show?
Could you, since you teed me up, the one at the Isla Vista bus stop?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for that, oops, sorry, I'm just pulling it up on mine so I can see it a little easier. Yeah, do you remember which ones it was?
Thank you, Chair and Directors. We'll walk you through the Isla Vista request, Mike Becker of staff. So there's 5 criteria. These were adopted by the board back in 2006, and it just should be noted that Mai and I have talked, and we want to consider updating the definition of what an unmet transit need is, as well as the reasonable to meet criteria, and we could bring that back prior to the next cycle. But first, the first criteria is it consistent with existing plans? So for this, we look at the regional transportation plan. Since it's in MTD's territory, we look at MTD's short-range transit plan. And neither of those plans mention service to the southwest quadrant of Isla Vista. So therefore, it's not consistent with existing plans or priorities. So that's the first criteria. The second one is related to safety. Can you safely operate whatever service is being requested? And this one, I believe for number 2, we also found that this criteria was not met because in the southwest quadrant, you're looking at a bunch of narrow residential roads that are overparked with no sidewalks, with pedestrians and bicyclists all over the streets, that it would be difficult to both navigate the streets as well as navigate around the parked cars as well as the pedestrians. Also, I should note that I can't recall the route number. There is a bus route that runs through the central Isla Vista. Mm-hmm. So no part of Isla Vista is further than a half mile from an existing transit service. And then the next one, the number 3, is would this meet the system performance requirements? And 3A and number 5 are basically the same, saying, will this meet the fare box recovery ratio? The ratio is defined in this board-adopted criteria as 20% recovery. And right now, MTD's, I believe their recovery is 18%, so they're not meeting this requirement system-wide. So considering that, and then how could this potential route going into southwest quadrant of Isla Vista at least meet 20%? And because there is a route that is nearby, we determined that it would just be poaching ridership one way or the other, and it is not a net result in new ridership. And then the fourth one, so 3B also is related to the number of passengers carried per hour. So MTD provides us with system-wide what their passengers per hour are. And again, because you're looking at just poaching ridership from one route to another, it would not result in an increased number of passengers on either route. It would be part of the ridership on both routes. Then the fourth one is the proposed service would not cause a claimant to incur expenses in excess of what they're already receiving for the TDA. MTD historically has always spent 100% of the funds that come to them on transit services. So therefore, any additional improvement would result in them spending money beyond what they have. So that's essentially walking through the criteria. Again, we do want to analyze these and determine if we should make some changes before the next cycle. But it is difficult to find an unmet transit. It's not difficult to find an unmet transit need. It's difficult to find an unmet transit need that is reasonable to meet.
I see.
And lots of it is because there's a lot of services in place already where that demand exists.
And I'm jumping on Supervisor Hartman's question here, but how did it get on the list in the first place of an unmet transit need?
So when we do the public process, we just collect comments, and a lot of those comments are, we divide them, whether it's an operational issue or an potential unmet transit need. So an operational issue would be, can you adjust the bus time by 15 minutes or something like that, where it's not, you're changing an existing service, but you're not providing an increment of new service. So that's how they get divided. And through this, we identified what Maya and I determined to be unmet transit needs, and then we take them and present them to the advisory committee and ask them to agree or make changes. And I think actually this year, I think we took a total of 11, and 7 came back, though 3 of them were the same. 7 came back as unmet transit needs. And lots of times what is asked for is it's already in place, that you can make that connection. Like for instance, there was a request for direct service between Isla Vista and the La Cumbre Junior High. Yeah. And you can do that now it would require you riding the bus from Isla Vista to the transit center and then trading. So you can make that connection. That's questionable whether that was even an unmet transit need. However, because the advisory committee determined it was, we went through the process for it.
Okay, thank you.
So is a major reason we're not qualifying as reasonable to meet because you need the 20% recovery and the system doesn't have that, and we can't guarantee that new routes would include that?
Right, Director Hartman, that's, yes, that is part of it. And I will say this mirrored the Transportation Development Act requirements until COVID. And then the state had waived the fare box requirements, though I believe they come back in 2026. That at some point in time, these will come back. But the way that it's written in this board-adopted criteria is to follow a 20% standard.
Yeah, I guess we have to protect the overall system for sure for it to be reasonable. Darn. Because we do want to get more people, and these are all good projects. So how are you going to change the criteria, or what are you thinking? What's the process and which criteria?
Director Hartman, for that, I think the first step would be to look at the other regions in California and see what their menu of criteria are and how they define what an unmet transit need is. and work through the advisory committee to see what fits for our region and get the advisory committee to make a recommendation, then bring it to you for your consideration and whether or not you wanted to change it.
So is that on the work program? I mean,
Yes.
sort of your, okay.
Yes.
I just want to comment on that comment before Director Brown. Nothing is stopping a transit operator from implementing any of these improvements. So if they've identified it in their short-range transit plan or from their board, they can implement any of these things. It's just whether or not you as a board require those transit agencies to meet these needs before any money is spent on street and roads. So if we're not spending any money on street and roads, it's kind of it doesn't go anywhere. So even if you identified it as unmet need, reasonable to meet, if they're already spending all their transit TDA dollars on transit anyway, it doesn't get to the streets and roads question. So again, this process we're required to do by law, and it's been asked, well, if you're spending all your money on transit, do you still have to do this process? And the answer was yes, even though there's kind of no point to do that. But it is informative to the transit operators. So we do go through this. It's a outside look of what the transit needs are. You get to review those. So in your role as in transit decision makers, you could help implement these things. Like, for example, you are all the transit operator for the Clean Air Express. So you could direct us saying, hey, this is a priority. Let's put that on our next work program or our next short-range transit plan and make that happen. So those are different ways of getting to where you want to go when you said bummer. So, okay.
All right, Director Brown?
I think the fact that you only have 83 responses tells me that you're doing a very good job, or it's very anemic with regards to the feedback, but that in and of itself tells me that it's pretty significant acceptance of the value and the service level you're providing. To go for that one or two individuals that have that comment, and that's where these unmet needs comes from, I'd have to say you're doing a pretty good job. The 83 is really a very low. I got to believe that the standard deviation on that would be pretty significant. So.
Dr. Silva.
I'm actually going to ask the other side of that question. Do we have the demographics of, if we only have 83 responses? I was looking through kind of the outreach, and I appreciate that you did some of your advertising. It was in English and Spanish, but it's kind of a self-selection bias that can come from this, and the fact that we had one attendee in Lompoc and 12 over 3 hearing, or of your meetings, and I looked at the timings, and a lot of that was during the workday of when someone would be doing. So I was just curious, do you have the demographics of who's guiding this insight, if that? Because I'm wondering if we maybe are not capturing the needs of the community based upon, you'd have to have internet service to be able to be 2/3 of these responses, which may be something that could put blinders on us.
Director Silva, that's a good question. To this point, we have not collected any information on the people who make comments. We do all our advertising, and as you mentioned, in English and Spanish. SBCAG's public hearing was intentionally straddled the workday, the after work hours. We did 4 to 6. We were there the entire time. Santa Maria, for them, they had 2 parts to it, where it was one during the day and one after work hours. I think Lompoc's was 2 to 3, or it was during the workday, 2 to 4. In the future, we could ask, especially for the survey question, if a lot of people participate online. It's much easier to participate online than it is to show up, even if it's on Zoom for a public hearing. That we could add a question on that survey to get some background information on them, and then use that to inform future years and to continue to improve. And I will say that over the last 5 years or so, that 83, which may not seem like a lot, that's a lot more than it was 5 years ago. We have done a good job of getting more people engaged in the process.
Yeah, thank you. If the demographics would just be helpful, I think, for us, but I really appreciate, I can tell that you put a lot of effort in to get, meet people where they are. So I just think being able to have the demos on the back end so we can make sure that it's capturing the holistic view, I'd really appreciate that. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from North County?
None.
Okay, very good. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Chair Rouse, members of the board, we did not receive any public comment on this item.
All right, very good. And with that, any further board discussion or a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Moved by Silva,
Second.
seconded by Brown. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Director Lee? Director Capps?
Aye.
Director Hartman? Director Nelson?
Aye.
Director Lavanino?
Aye.
Director Mosby? Director Brown?
Aye.
Director Julian?
Aye.
Director Silva?
Aye.
Director Patino?
Aye.
Director Perotti?
Aye.
Director Clark? And Chair Rouse.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to our executive director's report. Director Kern.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairperson, members of the board, yesterday the Central Coast Coalition held their 14th annual state legislative day in Sacramento. The coalition is comprised of the metropolitan planning organizations and regional transportation planning agencies for the Central Coast, from Santa Cruz all the way down to Santa Barbara. We came together to serve as one voice for the Central Coast and advocate on our collective priorities. Our trip was especially successful as we met with members of the state legislative delegation to advocate for our SB1 priorities and Cycle 4 applications, including our request of $137 million to complete the Santa Barbara 101, and advocate for priorities on the extension of the cap and trade funding, which was a hot topic at the state, as we have various representatives that are in leadership roles on the cap and trade discussion, so it was very pertinent to them. Senator Monique Limon is the chair of the Cap and Trade Working Group to extend the cap and trade beyond 2030. Assembly Greg Hart is also on the committee. We also met with Secretary of Cal STA, Tokes Omashakin, to advocate our priorities, but was also provided their perspective of small and rural areas and the impacts of statewide policies on our region, which was pertinent to our discussion today. I'd like to thank Chair Randy Rouse for joining us and advocating for our region's priorities. I'd also like to thank Sarkis Kachek and Maya Kulkarni of my staff, along with Gus Corey and Mitch Weiss for organizing our successful trip. So thank you again for going, Mayor Rouse. He's been SBCAG supporter for the past few weeks, so I really appreciate that. Per the item that was approved in your consent agenda, our main location for our April meeting will be in Santa Barbara. So we did adopt a new calendar to make that change, and that is due to the Board of Supervisors having their budget hearings that afternoon. So we want to make sure that people are in the main location, so we changed that to Santa Barbara. But Santa Maria location will still be available for those who want to travel there. And then also that came up today, the summary report on our retreat and the follow-up actions will be on your April agenda as well. So I'm hopeful we'll have a fruitful discussion there. And then I got a lot of homework to do on the follow-up actions of the items that you identified in that retreat. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Kern. Appreciate that. We'll move on to our committee meeting updates. Cal Vans, Director Nelson. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rouse. Cal Vans is plugging along. We're ramping up our miles as we're deploying to most of our agricultural producers. 90% of Cal Vans users are ag workers, and so this is, as the seasons are underway throughout the state of California, we're deploying more vehicles. So that's one piece to get out there. The other information is some of you may know that Cal Vans was singled out in the Prop 4 bonding. According to the state budget, it doesn't look like those bonding dollars will be made available for Cal Vans for at least the next 2 budget cycles. So for us, we're taking a look at our fiscal planning as we try to not only deal with the demand that currently exists, but also to anticipate future demand. And the funds from the Prop 4 bonding was also to help facilitate our pilot project on electrification of van pools And so we're not necessarily hitting a pause on that, but we're going to right size our pilot project with the existing funds that we have in our reserves right now instead of anticipating those dollars coming in from the state. So if anybody ever wants to know more about Calvans, I know way too much about it and would be happy to share with you. Thank you.
All right, very good. My apologies, I skipped over the Caltrans Director Report by Joe Irwin.
That's okay, Chair Rouse, but appreciate coming back to me. I only have a few things. So like Sarkis, in appreciation of the NCAA men's basketball and women's basketball tournament, only 4 updates, our final 4 from Caltrans for this meeting. I wanted to thank the community members who attended the March 12th public informational meeting we had for the Santa Lucia Canyon Road closure that is upcoming. It's good to have, this is part of that mix of safety and public engagement we talk about. I appreciate the discussion earlier with the directors on that. It's a mix of safety and public engagement. So this is a good example of that. So appreciate everybody who came out to that meeting. The second update I have is that the northbound and southbound Gaviota rest areas are temporarily closed, and that's going to be through almost the end of this month. It's through March 28th. This is because of road work that we've been doing for quite a while out there, repaving, and we're going to be installing new concrete median and guardrail and doing some electrical work as a part of that repaving project that's near that Gaviota tunnel all the way up to the summit of Nahoe there. But it's causing the closure of both the northbound and southbound rest areas there. So wanted to make sure people were aware of that. And the closure is going to be overnight from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So it should still be open during the day. Third update, the Olive Mill off-ramp has reopened in the northbound direction, but the northbound off-ramp at Hermosillo is now closed. And so this new traffic configuration will be there for about 5 months as we're making progress on the 101 project through the Montecito and Santa Barbara areas. And finally, if you've driven through the Refugio area, you will have noticed that the old southbound bridge is missing. It's gone now. The contractor has demolished that, and they're working on demolishing the abutments that held up that bridge as a part of the replacement project that's happening at Refugio. And I will welcome any questions that anybody might have for Caltrans.
Any questions for Mr. Irwin?
Chair Rouse?
Yes.
Director Lavanino?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so on that Gaviota, so I'm not really as interested in the rest stop as lane closure. How long do you expect that to stay as a 1-lane southbound? What's that scheduled for?
In the southbound, I can get the exact schedule for you in terms of
I don't need
when
exact. I mean, is it months still, or do you know?
I can look.
Well, that's all right.
I can. Yeah. I'd have to look it up on the
Sorry.
fly. But let me. Yeah. No. It's okay. It's a good question. I know that overall work is going to be completed this summer, so we're looking to wrap it up in a few more months.
Okay.
But it'll be the 1-lane configuration. I'm gonna have to speculate on it. I hate doing that in front of.
That's okay.
So let me get an answer back to you, and I'll work through Lauren or somebody in the SBCAG by the end of the day.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yes, Chair Rouse?
Yes, Director Nelson.
Thank you. Again, I wanted to thank you for the Santa Lucia meeting that took place at Cabrillo High School last week. It was well attended by both Caltrans staff as well as stakeholders and the general public. I think one of the reasons why it was well received was because it was expressed to be a temporary measure. So I'm just want to reiterate in the hopes of hearing eventually when the project description comes out for this temporary improvement or project that it recognizes that it is temporary, and also looking forward to hearing back from Caltrans on the funding of the corridor study so that we can look at long-term options. So just want to put that on the radar, and I guess ask you, when do you guys anticipate coming out with a project description for that safety improvement?
Are you talking specifically about the beginning, I guess the one that's imminent, the one that's going to be happening in the next 3 to 6 months, or 6 to 9 months, or are you referring to the longer
Yes, the
term
next
safety?
three. Yeah, the shutting down the left-hand turn lanes off of Santa Lucia onto Highway 1.
Out of Santa Lucia. Okay. I can work with, again, the team that is working on that through our operations and our maintenance group to see exactly when the official description of that work will come out. But I believe it should be noted because there's not going to be additional studies for the purpose and the need of the turning movement restriction. So it should be readily available, Director Nelson, and so I should be able to provide that for you.
Yeah, great. And again, reiterate my request that that the project description be temporary and have a time frame on how long that will be the safety improvement, as well as the commitment from Caltrans on funding corridor study in the meantime. Thank you.
Okay, I can look into that for you, Director Nelson, whether or not the temporary status of that is substantiated. Okay.
Director Rouse, this is Director Lavanino again.
Yes. Go right ahead.
I'm wondering, this is for Director Kern, just kind of, it's been a long history of SBCAG, and we have Caltrans here, and it's a great time for us to be able to tell them what our concerns are. But I'm wondering if, and I don't expect Joe to be able to come in here and give us an update on everything, because we're, scattered all throughout the county. But I just wonder if there's a more efficient way for us, either maybe, would there be a time frame that, maybe a couple of days before the meeting, that we would be able to kind of, hey, here's the questions that we want to give to Caltrans, so that, when we come in and ask, that they already know what we're going to ask, so that we have, we could get some answers, because most of this is for the public. I mean, and then they're not going to know what the response is to me or to Bob, and then we have to wait for the next month, and then we say, oh, okay, here's what's going on. I just think there might be a more efficient way to do this, and I hate putting Caltrans on the spot all the time, because when they're here, we're asking them about 25 different things scattered all over the place, and it's not their fault, but I'm just wondering if we could do this a little more efficiently.
Absolutely. Send me your questions, and I'll get them to Caltrans.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much for that report. And now we can move on to the LoSAN report. Director Parodi.
Thank you, Chair. The agenda for March 17th LoSAN was pretty light. We did discuss and finalize their rail corridor business plan for 2025-2026. There was a discussion on coastal resiliency update and the projects that are high priority. And the focus of the main conversation really did focus further south on the Del Mar Bluffs and that particular area and what's going on there and what's needed. They discussed marketing, and right now they're having different programs and for spring and summer, and right now they're doing 20% off your ticket, a midweek travel, Tuesday through Thursday, and it's from March 10th to April 30th. It's a really good time during spring break to go with your family. I know I've taken my family on trips, day trips, and it's really quite fun just to go down to LA for the day and go to Alvera Street and hop back on and be back the same night. That was pretty much it. The next meeting, we will not have a meeting in April, but we will have a meeting in May, and that's going to be in Los Angeles.
All right.
End of report.
Thank you. We'll move on to 1-minute reports. Any directors have any 1-minute reports? None here. Any in North?
I do.
Okay.
Yes, Chair Rouse, it's Director Nelson. I was told that I needed to do this publicly since I wasn't at the workshop. I'm listing my priorities for the workshop, so that could be added as part of the presentation next time. So just I'll run through them really quickly for staff, and then I'll also send it forward to them. Of those items that were discussed, my top priority, or the 5-point priority, was the Highway 166, Highway 1, Betteravia, Mahoney, what I would call the West Santa Maria Valley projects. My second priority was recognizing the North County sacrifice and trying to find a way to resolve that. That would be my 4-point priority, my second priority overall. Third priority, which would get 3 points, would be undergrounding of utilities. My fourth priority, which was 2 points, would be begin development of the plan for Measure A. And my fifth priority, which was the 1-point item, was streamlining permitting projects. So I'll go ahead and forward that to the clerk as well, so that can be on the record. But I was told I need to do this in a public meeting prior to our next hearing. So there it is. Thank you.
All right, very good. Any other 1-minute reports? Okay, with that, Director Kern's already announced the next meeting will be in Santa Barbara on April 17th in this chambers. And if there's nothing else, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.